Today we have our Executive Lunch and Learn series. We are a company called Advantage AI. We are proud to sponsor today's Executive Lunch and Learn. We have about 5 million users in 120 countries. And today we have a very special panel, and just want to start off with some ground rules for everyone. First of all, we have a wide variety of registrants from all parts of the globe, all different types of job functions. You can ask questions today. So this is informal. We're going to get right to our panel with some big questions that everyone will weigh in on. But if you have some specific questions, use the chat. We do have people working to get those chat questions to me to ask the panelists. In the alternative, if you don't get to a specific question that you might have that might be company specific or industry specific, you have an opportunity after today's event to send us a note. We will circulate that to the panelists, and we can also get you information from today. So a couple bites at the apple today. So with that, I'm going to introduce our 3 rock star panelists today. And I'm going to start first with Stephanie McGee. Stephanie is the Vice President, CHRO at Burgerville, very hot, hip restaurant in the Northwest with over 1,300 employees, 100 different locations, moving towards 100 different locations. And prior to Burgerville, she has a distinguished career, not only as a lawyer, but also as HR executive at places like PCC, University of Oregon, and Alaska Airlines. So welcome, Stephanie. In addition to Stephanie today, we have Miss Debbie Boyles, who is the director at Tadano. Tadano is a global organization with over 4,600 employees. Tadano is well known for its large, heavy maintenance and cranes. And Debbie is both strategy and execution with a long distinguished career in numerous organizations prior to joining Tadano. And lastly, we have Emily Hough that is joining us from Loomis. Loomis is the 9,000 employee security company. And Emily helps oversee all of the central US with a wide range of director level responsibilities and a very distinguished career in multiple organizations. So we really have a power-packed panel. It's intentionally diverse, and we're going to get some good insight as we move forward here. So the way this is going to run is we have some updated trends and tips fresh off of the annual SHRM conference and from our friends at Gallup and a few other consulting firms. We will share that, and then we're going to get the panel to weigh in. So we're going to go ahead and start us up. Panelists, I think if you don't have yourself muted, go ahead and mute, and then I'll fire up the questions. So Scott, we can go on to our next slide. Great. Our time today. 3 key ideas that have emerged as we hit 2024, as we enter kind of the Q3, Q4 into 2025. Understanding employee needs. How does that work post-COVID? How does that work in the AI world? Engaging and recognizing employees, and then artificial intelligence, moving from concept to reality. What are we seeing? So let's go to the fresh off the presses employee stats. And what we're seeing today, this is largely from Gallup in their annual workplace and from Forbes. It says, hey, look, no matter how you slice it today, 82% of employees are disengaged at work. So what does that mean? Well, it means we've got 23% that are actively engaged, actively working, and will respond and say, yes, I enjoy my work and I'm engaged at work. But we have 51% that are actively disengaged, 62% that are not engaged at all at work. What does that mean? That means that we have roughly half of all the workforce, this is US-based polls, that are looking or at least open to another job. And this is at an all-time high. So certainly we've always had these stats, but now post-COVID, and for various reasons we'll get into, this is a big problem. The estimate that came out 2 weeks ago is $1.9 trillion lost in GDP due to low engagement. And it makes sense. Lower productivity, higher, lower retention, higher turnover, all resulting from engagement problems. Next slide. Of note, if all of us were in a room and we said, hey, raise your hand if you do employee engagement, everyone would raise their hand, right? Every executive is going to say, yes, we engage employees, but there's a big disconnect. So if you ask the C-suite, sure, we recognize employees, we engage employees. You ask the same employees and they'll say, look, I haven't received anything in the past year, or I haven't personally been involved in that. So there's a big difference. And if we really parse that down, Gen Z and millennials feel excluded. Now, some of that has to do with remote. Some of that has to do with our policies. Some of that has to do with old management styles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's a big stat. That don't feel engaged. So the good news is most people want to be more engaged, right? They reflect that on our engagement surveys. So there is folks that are saying, hey, I'm disengaged, but I want to get engaged. So that's the silver lining. Next slide. Okay, so engagement has taken on a couple different layers. When we say employee experience, employee engagement, what does that mean? Well, today we need to look at, there's different ways to engage employees and different levels, depending on generations, depending on function, that we need to really look into what do our employees want for engagement, what do they need for the experience, what do they need for recognition. So if we go to the next slide, Josh Bershwin put together a real nice kind of study and did a study based on CROs and some other executives out there. It says, hey, what matters most to our employees? And Josh Bershwin and the team said, look, there's really about 6 buckets. It's got to be purposeful work, leadership, supportive workplace, the welfare and well-being, career growth, and trust in company. But the most important is, hey, we've got to have that trust in the company. I've got to have a supportive workplace. And then beyond that, I've got to have some career growth opportunities, supportive workshop, purposeful work. And this makes sense, especially when we're dealing Gen Y, Gen X, Gen Z, as well as, millennials, et cetera. We're seeing more and more importance on what matters to employees is very much how engaged they're going to be. So let's move to a quick panel discussion. And the first question of the day, we're going to start with Stephanie, and then we'll go Emily and Debbie. What are you seeing either in your organization or prior or in the marketplace? How do we understand employee needs or get at employee needs, Stephanie? What are you seeing?
Yeah, thank you, Matt. It's super interesting, actually. The key points that what you touched on, to me, that impact our workforce are the generational differences. So this is really one of the first times in history that you have 4 different generations all working together. Now, obviously, most of the boomers are leading the organizations. And there's a huge disconnect between I'm going to take it to the extreme, the Gen Zs with the boomers. And so what boomers think of recognition and what employees needs are very different than what a Gen Z employee might need or think. And I kind of equate it when I talk to other executives about this to the learning style. So some people are auditory, some people are visual, some people are experiential learners. It's kind of similar. When I was at SHRM, we had some pretty in-depth discussions about how Gen Z needs like a weekly touch point to feel important. They need to actually have kudos every week. And that is just not something that boomers or Gen X even consider. Like, we go to work, we work hard, our recognition is getting a paycheck, right? And yeah, it's nice to have things periodically, but we don't need those weekly touch points. Whereas some of the younger generations, that's what they need. And I don't know how much of it is environmental and or the lack of what they may have had during COVID and their experiential time with that, or how much it is that their parents were working 2 and 3 jobs to try to support the family, and they weren't there to support them. So it's very interesting, and you have to find a way to tap into all the different generations, in my opinion, in order to do this. So that means you're going to have to do various campaigns. There's not going to be a one size fits all in order to find out what the employees need from you, as far as an organization. In the quick casual restaurant industry, it's primarily the younger generations that work. It's primarily a starter job, but when people move up into management, they would be in a different generation, and it's hard for them to connect with the younger folks as well. So I'm saying young in both experience and actual age. So I'm just finding that it's a challenge, and to find out what actually speaks to each of the different employees and generations, more so than ever in the history, I would say, of the workforce in the country in all the years I've worked.
That's great. Emily?
Let me come off of mute.
There you go.
I was going to say, I also find some differences, but a lot to do in part also with where the individual is at within their career. So whether they're in an entry level position and have been with the company for a few years, or if they're in that C-suite position. And one of the things that, at least in our company, that we also find that coincides would be age for those positions as well. And we're dealing with, being a 200-year plus in company, a lot of longevity as well. So we have employees that could span from one day to, I think our oldest, our most senior employee has been with the company 56 years as of this year. So we have a huge span in what employees are looking for and where they're at in their career. So what we try to do is give different options. So there's options from, we recognize your 1-year anniversary. We are working on revising performance review plans and things like that as well, to take in consideration the feedback that the workforce is currently working for. They're not looking for, okay, you met these objectives anymore. They're looking for some of those soft skill approaches too, discussing what their next career path is going to be, even if that's not going to be with our company. They're looking at, how do you look at me as a person, and how are you looking to develop me as an individual? So we've been incorporating a lot of those things as well, extending into our benefits packages and other aspects of what we do as a company to take that into consideration, whether it's looking at support with daycare and things like that. So how do we keep people engaged and wanting to work for us, and the needs that they have with where they're at in their career? And I mean, it varies. Like, we do for our executives and our managers, you can win trips, which are great. Go to Rome, go to Bali, things like that. And then for our hourly staff, we find, based on engagement surveys that we do biannually, they're looking more for cash payments and rewards and things of that nature. So what we may offer to one group may be different than what we offer to the other group. And that's also based on what they're looking for. And what we do to kind of get an assessment of what employees might be looking for is we do surveys with employees at their 30, 60, 90, and 180. So we know where they're engaged with coming into the workforce, but then we also do a biannual survey as well that's extremely robust and takes in consideration of multiple different assets of their engagement, their manager relationship, and we analyze that year over year as well to see where we're at with targets and goals.
Great. Thanks, Emily. Debbie?
Thank you. One of the things that I feel like has been important in my role in a couple of different companies that I've been with is being that coordinator with the management team and the employees. And I have found that over the course of time, there have been a lot of managers that think they really know their team and they understand what they're looking for and what's important to them, but they haven't really had those honest discussions and taken the time to find out, kind of what their employees are all about. Like Emily mentioned, I think she mentioned she had an employee that had been there over 50 years or 45 years. I had a company that I worked with, and had one employee who retired while I was there, and she had actually come to work there right out of school and had stayed there for her entire life. And granted, you don't see that much anymore. So, there are things that are important to the different generations. And then here at Tadano, it's a Japanese-based company. So there's that cross-cultural, view that you have to take into consideration too, because somebody that is coming, and we have expats that work here for 2 to 3 years, and then they'll go back to Japan, and their needs and their focus is completely different, of course, than the employees that we have that are working just day to day in the U.S. We have locations in Houston, Southwest Virginia, and Tennessee, and even in those locations, those needs and those desires vary. But one of the things that I find that is most important is just having that communication with the employees. And if employees feel like they're being heard, that makes a big difference in how they feel included. And we mentioned remote work. I think that is one of those surprising things that maybe was not foreseen. Everybody's like, oh, yeah, I get to work from home. It's a great idea, but you may not realize that you may feel excluded. You may not feel as part of the group, your team, the company, as you would if you were going into the office every day. So I think it's just important for managers to, touch base with the employees and not just leave it, to an HR team or, maybe somebody else to understand what their employees are looking for. And I know, like we've said, things have changed over the course of time. Years ago, it was, what is my pay rate going to be? And that was kind of like the key thing. And now that's kind of fallen a little bit down the chain, and other things that are softer are more important to those individuals. And it's important that we as HR professionals understand, what those trends are and make sure that we are touching those points with them.
That's great.
Matt, can I jump back in just for a couple follow-up comments?
Sure.
So I was looking at the chat and I saw a few things. I think there was a comment that the generational gap is actually a gulf, and that's true. It's almost like the Mariana Trench. But there was some questions about like how we address the different generational gaps and how you actually find out what the different generational employees may need. And that was touched on by both Emily and Debbie, but I think there's different methods, right? Like, so I started by learning exit interviews because I was pretty new to the organization. And so it was exit interviews because people had already given notice. I moved on to engagement interviews. So when an employee even calls me, they don't know it, but I'm kind of interviewing them to find out what is important to them. And what I'm finding is that, like Debbie said, it was pay was the main thing before. I now think and feel that those soft skills are becoming more vital. So the mental health and the work-life balance is definitely more important to the more recent generations and people who are newer in their career, as Emily spoke about. I think it's very important that we start to focus on those in our benefits packages and time. And so not just an EAP and a benefits package that has that, but do some challenges around those topics. Do some, through your wellness and health initiatives, you can do some challenges around mental health and well-being. We're very customer service friendly and forward organization, obviously, because we're in service. And we have the average lifespan of our employees is 1.5 years. Let's be real. It's quick casual. But we do have some employees who've been here 40 years and started out as a crew member and worked their way up and are now a vice president. So it's very important that you're able to tap into all of those resources. And sometimes I use that vice president to go out and speak to a crew member to be able to relate, to show them career growth and pathing. Not only that, we've enhanced like tuition and continuing education type benefits in our benefits package, because that is something that's super important. So while they may not see a career with Burgerville, we want to help them understand that they are important to us and we want to further their life, not just their career, if that makes sense. So I think those are some of the things that I would say that are important to us.
That's great. Thanks, Stephanie. And as we go through here, we have a couple people putting together some chat questions. So we've got a couple that are up our sleeve for the panel here based on the chats as we move forward into great segue to recognition and engagement. So let's go. So engaging and recognizing employees. So what are we seeing out there? So this is, again, the trends, and this is from multiple sources. And we're seeing kind of 5 areas where companies are saying, hey, we need to get involved, cross-generational, multi-generational, multi-location, multi-function. What are we seeing? First is that meaningful feedback. And I think the panelists alluded to, hey, more communication and also training the managers on how to solicit feedback, not only from the HR, but also from their managers. Second is career training. And do we have more options available at different levels for career training, both soft as well as some more formal opportunities? And then the volunteering. And we see this in some forms along with employee groups, more opportunities to raise your hand or to get involved with things that may not be directly work related, but certainly are important to those individuals, that those employee needs. And then good old events and fun. And this isn't always happy hours. Events could be, hey, lunch and learns. Events could be all sorts of different things depending on what your group is. And it could be large opportunities, smaller opportunities, but different and more. That's what we're seeing, more and different ways to engage employees. Next slide. And then, so how about the recognition? So engagement is one thing. And when we put on the engagement hat, we're thinking, okay, customer satisfaction survey, how are we engaging folks? If you think about it though, recognition is a different animal. They're very related. And when we recognize employees, it's saying, hey, I want to recognize you. That can be manager to employee. It can be peer-to-peer. It can be company-wide, division-wide, et cetera. But what we're seeing is more ways for recognition in different ways. And this, again, is along the generation gaps, but also by function, by location. So what are the big ones? Service markers. Used to be sales contests. That was about it. Now we're saying, hey, 30 days, congratulations. And we're seeing that going out to peers. We're seeing anniversaries. We're seeing attendance markers, safety markers, all sorts of different ways to automate recognition. In addition, birthdays and anniversaries, but it may go to the peers. It may go out further. So via technology to other folks. Contests, and it's not just the sales contests, but it could be all sorts of fun types of contests. We're seeing step challenges, ways to kind of engage and recognize folks. Then the learning and achievement. So we're seeing through technology tie into your L&D efforts. So someone passes a stage 1, and we go from, hey, just starting in the organization to getting certified in some skill. Hey, we can shout about that. We can recognize that employee. And then leaderboards. And leaderboards, if we see that gamification work in all sorts of areas. How many managers? There's a leaderboard for the managers that have given out recognition. Let's recognize managers for getting feedback. Let's recognize employees for all sorts of stuff. So we're seeing more, and we're seeing different, and we're seeing it automated. Next slide. Okay. Bottom line is, what doesn't work is, hey, we run after something and we go do something real quick, and then it fades away. We get our engagement surveys back. We need more engagement. We go do something, and then it falls off 2 months later. So those consistent experiences equals higher engagement. And all 3 companies we're talking about here today, different cultures, different locations, different industries. They're all different, but find something that works, but be consistent. And that leads to that higher engagement. So we're going to go back to the panel. And we're going to start with Emily this time. We're going to go to Debbie and then Stephanie. Just talk about, hey, recognition and engagement. So you got back your customer engagement survey. We want to increase engagement. We want to increase that recognition. What are you doing? What are you seeing in the marketplace?
Yeah, and I actually, former to the company I'm with now that I've been with for 4 years, we started a program when I was with the casino industry for a number of years that I've brought with me here that's been really successful when you do have that type of employee engagement experience survey. And what we used to do is we would analyze the data. And then when we would get the data, we would also post via wall wraps or TVs or things like that, the results of the surveys, because it's so important to me that when you get the data back, that employees know that you're going to do something with it and that you're also transparent with the data. And I think when you show them that, they also can see where the different values lie. Now, you're not going to post the worst of the worst survey or the feedback about the manager. I mean, not the worst of the worst survey, but that manager who gets called out. Don't put that on your wall. Please don't do that. You'll have a harassment complaint or something of that nature. But we did used to do, and I have done as well at Loomis, a you spoke, we listened type of feedback. So when we would get this individual comments, we would address certain things in a you spoke, we listened column. And whether we put that out in a newsletter or something of another format, the employees can hear what we're doing and how we're responding upon the different things. And then from the leadership side of it, I think it's very important that leaders individually look at the survey data and they create an action plan around it, whether it's 1 to 3 things that they highlight, that they say we can improve upon this, and here's how we're going to improve upon it. Whether it's creating a communication board because employees aren't always aware of what's going on, or we're going to buy all new resources because we don't have the enough gloves or they're not accessible, whatever it is. And then to do a midpoint check-in. So I think, as was referenced just a second ago, is not letting it fall off, which is extremely important. I found in the past that you do an action plan and then it falls off and then it doesn't get touched and addressed again until the following year. So what we've always instituted, and I think is very important, is just a midpoint check-in with the leaders, like what's working, what hasn't worked. And sometimes they're like, hey, I thought I could do this, but strategy-wise, I just don't have enough time to execute this plan. I would see that all the time. Leaders would say, I'm going to do individual one-on-ones with every single one of my 100 employees once a month. And I'm like, let me know how that goes. Let me know how you can keep that up. And you can't, right? So it's sometimes letting leaders also see, here's what I propose I can try to do. That didn't work. Let's readdress in 6 months from now and see if that strategy worked or not. So that's been really great with what we do with the surveys, and kind of hearkening back to what I mentioned earlier is looking at the different things that employees want, having that question in there from the employee base. Would you prefer gift cards? Would you prefer cash? Would you prefer a little thank you note for your anniversary? And finding different ways to incorporate those things into how you're engaging employees. We do it's not every anniversary. We have it targeted out at 1, 3, 5, and then 15, and every 5 years from there. And 10, 15 is an anniversary yearbook, and you can sign that. It's like a school yearbook. It gets personally printed for everyone. Their coworkers can sign it. They can pass it around. They can add photos to it if they want as a memory. But before that, leaders can actually formally type things into it. I mentioned the trips. We do the trips for our more leadership teams where they get to get those items, gift cards during holidays or other recognition, and then physical items. Like some people like going onto the company marketplace and buying that speaker or that bag or the jacket. So having the different options, I think, is really important. But from every survey I've done, the leader on what people are always looking for comes back to a monetary compensation. I mean, that's always a thing I find that's the highest. We want to do all of the other stuff, the events, the parties. We are global, and in the US, we have locations everywhere. So from a local perspective, we tell our locations, do those things, have the engagement parties, do the birthdays. We're not going to run that from a corporate perspective. Take your budget, allocate a portion of it, do a holiday party, do a once a month birthday party for everyone. We'll look at the higher level things because that is going to be something that they want. But we, from a budget perspective, are going to control the more expensive things, like sending out that $50 gift card to 10,000 people, once a year. So that's how we target it and use those surveys to really determine what the employees want outside of having the one-on-one conversations, which are phenomenal and give you some more feedback as well.
That's great, Emily. And then Debbie, what are you seeing in terms of recognition and engagement?
So sometimes I think it just goes down to basic things that I think we sometimes take for granted that everybody does. But when I'm working with managers, Emily said, talked about this manager that said, "Oh, I'm going to talk to all of my 100 employees one-on-one," and you may not be able to do that, but if you create that culture within that team where I'm a strong believer in the open door policy where anybody can stop by and talk to me about anything, and I encourage our managers to do that as well, and just create that rapport with their teams, and that can create that just a basic level of, okay, you care about what's important to me, and you have time to talk to me. From the feedback from direct supervisors, from the management team, from the executive team, even just little things of just talking to employees as you're walking through their workspace, acknowledging them. And, sometimes I have had people that never say a word to anybody. And I'm like, try warming that up a little bit and talking to, the folks that you come in contact with. Career training, I think, is a great way to invest in employees, and it benefits not just the employee, makes them feel better, about themselves, about their career choice of joining your company, but it also benefits the employee or the company because, you're spending time to cultivate that employee, to build their experience, so they in turn are going to help to move the company forward. And then with volunteering, one of the things that we did when I was with Lowe's Home Centers, I worked on the store side, the retail side, as well as at the corporate office. And we would have Lowe's Heroes projects where we would come together in smaller groups or, in the individual communities, or as a regional, like Habitat Build or something of that nature. And those kinds of things just bring the employees together, and they're focused on a common goal. And it's surprising how much that just builds engagement with employees and excitement. And then at the end of whatever project it is, they're seeing that impact they've had on the region or on their individual communities. One of the things that I have found that has been really instrumental in building engagement is focus groups that are cross-functional. So you have try to include individuals from every aspect and every facet of your company, and have a lunch with them, talk to them about what are the concerns in your area. And if you build that relationship, it's surprising how open employees are to share information with you, and you can find out really what the nuts and bolts are that you need to concentrate on. Having those events, family days, health and wellness events, I think are really a good way to invest in employees. Safety recognition, we here at Tadano are heavy equipment manufacturer, and so safety is very important to us. And we have a great safety record, and our employees really buy into that. So that's something that is really important here. Having team activities, we try to almost create things that we can have engagement activities around. One of the things that we did recently is we had manufactured our 100th crane of a certain kind, and we had a big celebration for that, did a company photo and lunch and all of that kind of thing. So it's just spending that time and getting creative. Sometimes budgeting may be an issue, and you have to sometimes be creative and just come up with things that may not cost a lot, especially if you have a big group that you're providing something for. But there are ways to do that. So it's just about, getting creative and keeping the employees forefront.
That's great. Stephanie?
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've moved through various industries as well, and probably the most challenging one is the current one that I'm in, simply because it is multi-generational, more so than the other industries in manufacturing and in higher education that I was in. But also because we have 40 locations spread out amongst 2 states currently, and we're growing like crazy over the next couple of years. And so it's not like I can personally get out to these locations, nor can my core HR team. So probably the number one facet that I work on is basic communication. I mean, the one thing that has remained true throughout the years is that people like communication. They don't like being left in the dark where they have to make up a story as to what's going on or whether they're appreciated. So basic communication of thanking somebody if they've done something that seems kind of minute and small in a day, but they do it consistently the right way, that goes miles in every generation. Saying hello when they walk in, that goes miles in every generation and in basic customer service. For recognition, for managers, we do, recognition at events, company-wide events that we have. We'll bring the managers in. So we also do monetary. We also do gifts. We do gifts at special times of the year, service awards when they reach milestones. And for the hourly workers, because again, our average lifespan for most of our hourly workers is a year and a half-ish. There are some who have been here for a couple decades, but we do gifts and we communicate. And then we also do a lot of contests, and we find that the competitive nature spans the generations as well. And so there's a lot of different ways you can maximize the contests, whether it's through safety, whether it's through service, whether it's through speed of service, suggestive selling. There's all sorts of ways you can capitalize on that. And so my hardest obstacle that I'm overcoming right now is how to communicate those out, because not all of our employees have a company email, right? So the thing that I'm looking at right now, instituting, and I'll be partnering with an organization outside ultimately, but I'm vetting basically, let's get real, social networking is a thing, and people like likes, and people like clicks, and people like recognition in that area. Every generation does, whether they say it or not. Once they get involved with it, they like that. They like that recognition. And so we're kind of creating an intranet social networking site that would be for our employees of our company. And my task will be getting the CEO and some of the other C-suite to actually go in and like something, or to actually make a recognition post and those types of things, and allow for some roasting sometimes when something happens that maybe isn't as great, but respectful roasting of the leadership, because it makes them more real. So that's my number one goal, is to get that going in the next year, to where we can do awards and recognition through that site, where they feel a personal touch, even though I can't get out to that restaurant that's 3-hour drive from me that day. I can post a recognition that other people can also recognize and jump in on. So that is some of the ways that we're looking at doing it. Obviously, we have, the service awards, the contests, the leaderboards, those things that have already been touched on. It just doesn't speak to everybody. And I think the wave of the future is more of an inter-social networking site that only employees can see, but employees can see on their phone when they're at home, or when they're on their break, or whenever they have an opportunity to do that. And if they've observed something, to also give some recognition, whether it's to a manager or a coworker. So that's some of the things that we're looking at doing.
I've been taking notes across the board here. Some good concrete examples from all 3 panelists. So thank you all. I just want to do a gut check here. Lots of questions in the chat. We're going to get to a few of those right out of the gates. If we don't cover it, you have another bite at the apple, so we can come back and we're going to get to our panelists after today with some follow-ups for you. In addition, we're going to have one more kind of panel discussion here. And so we're going to get through AI and then some closing comments just in terms of where we're headed over the next 15 minutes. So if we go to the next slide. Okay, artificial intelligence from concept to reality. Okay, everyone has heard about AI. Lots of people have had some forms of training, formally, informally. It's all over the events the last 2 years. This is what we are specifically doing and specifically seeing. So when we see artificial intelligence, that's been around forever, right? Nudges, automation. But here's the difference. So just as a quick way to do this, this is based on lots and lots of questions the last couple of webinars we've done. This is it. So if I have Emily and I have Stephanie in the same organization, and Emily gives a shout out or a badge or says something nice to Emily 9 months ago, right? Hey, thanks for your help on my shift, Emily. Then let's go fast forward. 9 months later, it's Stephanie's anniversary. It's her 2nd year anniversary at the firm. So what happens is, using Gen AI, is I will get, you will see a little opportunity for Emily that says, hey, Emily, remember Stephanie? Would you like to send her a anniversary congrats? And Emily says, oh yeah, hey, thanks, that's great. And then Gen AI is going to say, would you like me to write that for you? Oh, absolutely. Now let's give you some examples. So that's where Gen AI comes into recognition, right? Or this idea of recognition and engagement, right? It is coming in and recognizing, okay, what is important in this culture and how can we automate that? And then let's take it one step further. How can we do the quality? So rewards, recognition, what we see on rewards is, hey, this is a hot item that a lot of people like. So if you go to your company store, everyone loves this particular hoodie with this particular, is this something you're interested in? If not, we see this, so we're seeing these nudges, recognition, rewards, automation. That's how that works. All right. So next slide, and we'll get to our panelists. Where are we seeing these nudges? Where are we seeing the automation? A lot has to do with what's important on the areas we just discussed. That social impact, that recognition, as well as a career training. The nudges. Hey, you've been here 90 days and you passed this certification. Have you looked at this certification, right? And we can get real specific around that. Events and opportunities. We see that you joined the diversity group, and that's great. Hey, are you aware that we have this event coming up next month, or it's MLK Day? So we see those nudges, and what happens? We see a big bump in engagement. We see that ownership. We see more opportunities for that appreciation. And you can extend this out. Employee groups and nudges. Now, I'm going to go and immediately go to the panel. But as I go to the panel, I want to do two things. One is I'm going to ask one of the questions that came through on the chat. And then I'm going to allow each of the panelists in kind of our next 10 minutes here to talk about what are you seeing with AI, if anything, in your organization. And secondly, just take kind of from 10,000 feet, now that we've talked employee needs, recognition, engagement, and AI, any parting thoughts? So we're going to go to kind of final round here, AI parting thoughts. And we're going to start this time with Debbie.
From an AI perspective, I think, it's obviously a great tool. I think we'll see it more and more. Everybody has a busy schedule. We've talked about different areas where, you can engage employees and you can talk to employees and you can do employee events. But let's just be honest, that all takes a lot of time. So one of the things that I do like about AI is that it can kind of help keep you on track. So, if you get that day-to-day grind going and you're like, oh, before you know it, you had a plan at the beginning of the month and then it's the middle of the month and you're like, I'm behind. It can help you keep on track and give you those nudges, like Matt was talking about, to keep you focused on the things that are important. And also the intuitive nature. So as the more you're out there and you're using different aspects of it, it's, similar to Amazon. Everybody uses Amazon. You go on there and you buy things and it's like, oh, well, how about this? How about that? So it does provide you, with maybe something that you haven't thought of either. A new aspect or a new avenue you can go down, but it will help to navigate all of that employee engagement and those things that will lead to that engagement being increased. And, the good outcome is the employees are going, wow, you remembered this. I can't believe you remembered, my birthday, my work anniversary, my, certification that I just received. And, you must really care. So it really is important, and it helps tremendously to keep us going in the direction, in a positive direction that we want to travel.
Great. Okay, we're going to go up to Stephanie and AI thoughts, and then parting comments for the group.
Yeah. So, we currently use AI for recruiting to an extent, and then we jump in once the AI program that we are using generates some leads. I intend to build AI into the social networking site for things like those reminders and also trends of topics, and then also for reminders. I personally feel like HR is a resource to the humans, right? So we are the resource to the humans. And so I think that a lot of AI, or a lot of professionals, are concerned about AI kind of replacing not the position itself, but the function. And I think that the personal touch is super important. So while I cannot individually go out to all of our 40 restaurants that will be rapidly growing myself, I can help others understand the importance of that. So surveys may or may not work for organizations. We could use the social site that I'm intending to build for surveys. We did kind of an in-house grown survey monkey survey to all employees and encourage them all to apply and to all participate in it. I got some good feedback, but I did get a lot of kind of nothing burger, if I would say that, responses, because I don't think there was a high engagement in that. So for our workforce, I don't think surveys necessarily are going to be the hot ticket. I think it's going to be listening. It's going back to the basics, communication and listening to employees. So as much as I'm often stuck in the office writing policy and or looking at strategy, it's very important that I actually get out to the restaurants and engage. It shouldn't be that when I walk into a restaurant, they're like, oh my gosh, it's Stephanie, like they do now. It should be like, hey, Steph, can I talk to you about something? That's what I prefer. And so I think that the ROI on that personal touch is important. And I'm not talking about just from the head leaders within the company, but also showing by example that that's what we should do, so that then the mid-level managers and the entry-level managers are doing the same thing to engage the workforce. I think that's really the only way we're going to be able to breach that gulf, as somebody said, between the generations, because different things are speaking to different people. So I'll be using AI in some of the automation, but I still think that personal touch of communication and actual listening to employees is vital.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. And Emily, you get to wrap us up.
Coming off of mute there. Yeah, so in regards to AI, we've been using it in a couple of different aspects, and we also had this really great 3-day summit where we actually spoke about AI and how we were going to use it as HR professionals. And from an operations side, one of the things that we've been doing is using AI to support our operations in hours that need to be logged or the routing. So we do a number of different things within our industry, but one of the things we do is with processing. So whether you're processing cash or which is what we do, or you're processing tubes of lipstick, let's say, you're putting those together. we've been using AI to calculate how many people do we need versus how much work we have, and then what's our ideal amount of processing that we should do as well. So putting in those numbers and using it to kind of look at our head count has been an advantage, as well as using it as well to plug in what different locations do our drivers need to drive to, what may be the best route on AI to get that route completed the fastest as well. So that's been really saving the hours for our employees, and also taking a look at our staffing and seeing in turn if we're staffing correctly. And in regards to staffing, I know a lot of people have used for a long time AI features and tools to select keywords, which we do, right? Keywords on an applicant's resume that we may be looking for a certain position, or things we don't want, because in our industry, there's certain things we can't hire for. You have to be over age 18 to work for us. So asking certain things like that and looking for qualifiers. We also just recently, this quarter, which is pretty cool, I was just looking at it, our training platform will recommend, based on different things you've looked at or trainings you've taken or what you've shown interest in, other trainings that you may want to take that they offer. So there's a new banner down there that essentially says, I saw you looked at this, you might be interested in also taking this. So that helps from an engagement perspective as well. I'm not having to go in and look at that person's or talk to them about what they might be interested in. The system is able to make those recommendations. So it's saving me time as well. So again, all about time saving metrics, which I know Debbie was mentioning as well, the importance of using AI to support with scheduling. You know, whether that's the scheduling for us from the operations side or my own schedule, which I've not used it, but I know that my counterparts have, plugging in your task for the day and seeing what may be the best, you know, schedule for you to get what you need done. So I think AI is a great tool. I like using it to redraft an email, because sometimes, you know, we use HR jargon and I'm replying to somebody and I'm like, hey, reword this, and, you know, layman terms. And that's been great. It's been super helpful for me to better communicate when I think I'm making clear sense, but not everybody knows what ADA is, right? So I think that's great to take a look at it that way. And just some final thoughts. I think it's important to try different things. It's okay to know that not everything's going to work. And sometimes something you try, you have to kind of let that go and then try something different. And you might try 10 different things and you might get the one thing that sticks. So don't be scared about, you know, not every investment and everything you're going to spend your time on is going to be the thing that's going to be what you end up with at the end result. But do get the buy-in. I think one of the things I know Stephanie was talking about was, you know, being concerned about when you walk in and people might not be on board or they might not be scared of you. I think it's very important that from the top down, you have that buy-in from the leaders that people look up to. And if they're, you know, speaking in a positive light about things, including HR, that'll definitely help you moving forward as well.
That's great. Okay, so we're going to just wrap up with a couple quick slides here. One is old Ted Lasso, right? I think we've heard the theme from all three of you, that personal commitment, right? That personal touch, it goes a long way. And if we go to our next slide. Okay, so here's the bullet. We've seen this come across the chat a couple different ways. How do you get budget? You know, how do you work with your exec team? How do you implement these? A lot has to do with the ROI. I mean, we're all preaching to the choir, right? People are really the investment here. Now we quantify it. And I'll tell you, with very low unemployment and coming off of COVID, we're getting more and more reception from very high levels at the board and the CEOs that are saying, hey, employee engagement directly impacts productivity, turnover, absenteeism, customer satisfaction. By the way, that employee net promoter score, that equals what our customers are saying too. So, you know, we're looking at external dollars has to do with our investment internally. And all of this is available that we'll send out for those that want it. So as a final note here on our last slide, from Doug Connett, hey, to win the marketplace, you must first win the workplace. So want to thank our great panelists for all their expert time, opinion, sharing of resources, and to everyone for joining us today. Thank you for your time, and we will follow up so that you have access to the recording here today. So much thanks to everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks all.
Thank you.